On today's installation video, we'll be showing you how to install a RaceChip on the Porsche 4.0 Turbo. Before installing the RaceChip, please wait until your engine is cool enough to work on. Put your parking brake or emergency brake on. If your vehicle is equipped with an alarm system, please disable it. Pop the hood, roll up the windows, close the doors, and press the lock button on your key fob and move that key fob 30 feet away. You're going to wait about 10 minutes after for all the electricity to clear from underneath the hood. To begin the installation, the first step is to remove the plastic engine cover. Now, to get access to the various sensors, we'll need to remove the two plastic engine covers on either side. There'll be about 6 locking tabs, 3 on each side, that we'll need to remove to get access to these panels. To remove the locking tabs, we'll grab a small flathead screwdriver or body removal tool and pick up on the center to remove the locking tab. Now do the same thing on the other side. With the 6 locking tabs removed, next up is to remove the rubber gasket from the engine. Now it's held on by a simple C-clamp around the entire bottom, so just pull away gently and set this aside, as we'll need to reuse this once we're done. With everything out of the way, we're now going to grab from the edge of the side covers and pull away from the body. There'll be a few locking tabs along the outside. Run down the side until all locking tabs are removed, and then you can pick up and remove the side cover. And of course, we'll need to repeat this process on the other side as well. Now that we have both plastic side covers removed, we can get access to our connection points. We'll start with our driver's side, and we'll begin with our A connection going to our turbo boost pressure sensor. The turbo boost pressure sensor is located down here on the turbo inlet pipe. To unplug the OEM sensor plug, we'll first pull back on the gray locking tab and press down to unplug that sensor plug. Then we'll grab our female end of our RaceChip supplied wiring harness and plug it directly into that male end of the OEM sensor plug. Make sure you route the wiring harness as you head down towards the sensor itself. Then we'll grab the male end of the RaceChip wiring harness and plug it directly into the OEM sensor plug. We'll move on to our B connection, going to the driver's side manifold absolute pressure sensor. Now you can see there's a nice little spot right here to reach your hand down in, and we will show you where the B connection here is on the end of the long screwdriver. There will be a red locking tab on this sensor, so we'll pull back on the red locking tab before we press down to unplug that OEM sensor. Just like on the A connection, we're going to first begin with the RaceChip female end of the wiring harness, taking that male end of the OEM sensor and plugging it directly into the smooth side of the RaceChip female connector. Then we'll want to take our RaceChip male end of our connector with the locking tab and plug it back into that OEM sensor, locking it in place by pushing in on the locking tab until it clicks. And now that we're all done with the driver's side, we're going to go ahead and move over towards our passenger side to do the same thing on the boost pressure sensor and manifold pressure sensor. So again, we'll begin with our A on our passenger side to our turbo boost pressure sensor, which is located in the front of the car. You can see it right here. First, going to unplug the OEM male sensor by pulling back on the gray locking tab and pressing down. And then we'll start with our RaceChip female end, plug that in, lock it in place, as well as our male end, plug that into the OEM sensor and lock it in place. With the passenger side A connection securely made, let's go ahead and move on to our B connection, going to the passenger side manifold absolute pressure sensor. So just like before, this one will have a red locking tab on it. We'll go ahead and pull back and press down to unlock the red locking tab. Next up is the B connection on the passenger side, which you can see here. Now we're going to take the male end of the RaceChip wiring harness and plug that into the OEM sensor. And then take the female end of the RaceChip wiring harness and plug that into the OEM sensor plug. With our A and B connections made securely on both sides of the motor, we'll move to our C connection, which will be our camshaft position sensor. Be right here in the front on the top of the motor on the passenger side. We're going to go ahead and unplug it by pulling back and pressing down on the gray locking tab. And then we're going to take our female end of our RaceChip wiring harness, the C connection, and plug that directly into the OEM sensor plug. Smooth side going to that locking tab. Lock it in place. Then we take the male end of the RaceChip wiring harness and plug it directly into the OEM camshaft position sensor. Now we're going to remove the deactivation plug and replace that with the RaceChip. Don't throw away your deactivation plug. Throw that in your glove box or center console. Now we're going to use our 4 supplied locking tabs and insert them into the 4 holes on the outside of the RaceChip. The really nice thing about these mounting tabs is it allows you to use the longer supplied zip ties to mount horizontally or vertically, and if you ever need to remove the RaceChip for any reason, instead of having to cut the zip ties, you simply can press the locking tabs to remove the RaceChip but leave the zip ties in place. So for this application, we're going to mount the RaceChip right here using the longer supplied zip ties. When mounting the RaceChip, we want to stay away from any hot or moving parts, so we found this area to be a pretty good spot as it's also hard for moisture to get to. And then we'll want to take our excess wiring harness, we're going to also bundle this up and put this in a place away from the hot moving parts. Please note, when installing the RaceChip wiring harness, we're going to want to stay away from hot and moving parts. So as you can see, we're going to zip tie in a couple of spots around the engine to keep the wiring harness away from the moving and hot parts. If you're going to zip tie any fluid lines or electrical lines, we don't want to zip tie too tight to pinch off any flow of fluids or to pinch the electrical lines. Now with the wiring harness securely mounted in place and away from the hot moving parts, let's go ahead and trim the excess ends off of the zip ties to give everything a nice OEM look. Now with everything securely mounted and zip tied in place, we're going to go ahead and reinstall the 2 plastic side covers. We're going to start with the outside and press those into place before we go ahead and lock the rest in with the locking tabs. Now reinsert the 6 locking plastic pins. We're going to go ahead and just press down on the locking tab on the inside. Next up, we'll reinstall the rubber seal that goes around the outside of the engine bay. Again, this is like a C-clamp, so it's just the bottom edge. It's going to lock around the plastic lip. And slowly work your way around the engine, making sure it clips into place. Last but not least is to reinstall the plastic engine cover. Start in the default setting of the RaceChip for the first time you test drive the car. If everything works great, you can then move the RaceChip to the next level up. Be aware that the car needs some time to adapt before releasing the full performance upgrade. Now, get out, drive, and enjoy your RaceChip.